Hello, everyone. We are going to get started. This is a new media series presentation on behalf of UCCS-IASP. We're calling it UCCS-IASP Presents. The title is ARK, A Critical Approach to VR. This is in collaboration with Colorado College, Visual and Performing Arts UCCS, and the GMI program. I would like to introduce Kevin to introduce Kathryn. Go ahead, please, Kevin.
Thank you, Professor Semwal. It's my pleasure to be here. I can introduce Kathryn as an artist and a friend, and as to what she's going to speak about today, I am excitedly not at all able to introduce it because it's something I don't know anything about, which is why I'm excited to be here. But it's also the way I would like to introduce her. I met Kathryn 4 or 5 years ago through my work at the Public Theater in New York City, and in a residency program that we've created here at UCCS to encourage and to help platform the work of exciting artists in the country and the world to work with our students and with faculty. And one of the great things that we have implemented, and Dr. Semwal has been a part of this, is especially looking to artists who have interdisciplinary approaches to art, who can come to a university setting and obviously work with theater students for a couple of weeks on whatever project they're working on, but who have interest in reaching out to other departments, to computer science, to biology, to music, to psychological health. We've had all of those sorts of connections that have been made in the past years. And as I was researching a few years ago, as I was researching who must come and be a part of this project, a colleague of mine at the Public said, you have to know Sister Sylvester, AKA Kathryn Hamilton, who came out and did a project called Brecht Forensics, which is a whole other story we can talk about some other time. That was an extraordinary project a couple of years ago at UCCS. I have since gotten to know Kathryn as a colleague and friend whose work constantly surprises me and constantly leaves me confounded because she works in ways that are so at the same time over my head and accessible, and that's what makes her such a wonderful artist. And so when I heard she was working on VR and things relating to what you do, Dr. Semwal, I put the two of you in touch, and it is my pleasure to introduce Kathryn Hamilton.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to UCCS for putting this together and for hosting it, and to CC as well. We have people in the room here. It's a strange experience to be doing both the Zoom and the live. So I'm going to keep looking backwards and forwards between the two. But yeah, it's really wonderful to be here. And I am excited for myself and Deniz to talk about this project called ARK that we've been working on for the past 4
years, I think.
4 years. And yeah, this piece, it began really as a research project and has kind of spun out into a lot of different forms over those years. So we're going to start talking about some of the research behind the project, some of the things that kind of led us into our interest in this particular topic. And then we're going to screen a short film for you that hasn't been seen yet. So you're gonna kind of be our test audience for it. And then we'll do a Q&A. And then for the people who are at CC, we have the virtual reality piece set up for people to test if they want to take a look at that afterwards as well. So I'm going to pass over to Deniz to begin talking about ARK.
Thank you, Kathryn, and hi everyone. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to share a presentation. So just give me a second. Can you see the presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we are working on this project called ARK, which is a research-based project, a research-based transmedia project. And so far, we have created some writings, but a short film, a 2-channel video, and also a virtual reality prototype. And all these kind of different transmedia results are continuing to develop. So before, as Kathryn said, before we show the film to you, we want to talk a bit about our research and how we started this project, and what are some of the questions that led us our research and that actually made us curious and drew us into this topic. So back in 2014-15, I was a research assistant at MIT's Open Documentary Lab and was working on virtual reality. And at the same time, Kathryn was also researching virtual reality and developing an article on it. And that's like how our paths crossed back then. And around that time, a hype cycle was starting with virtual reality. It was, what happened then is like there was this company called Oculus Rift founded by Palmer Luckey, and they raised like a $2 million on Kickstarter. It was this like gaming headset goggles, which got a lot of attention. And in a couple of years, it was sold to Facebook. I believe this is in 2015 or 16 for $2 billion. And suddenly everyone's attention was there. And we started looking at this to see what types of futures they were imagining and what type of a society lies in this technology, if there is any. And what happened, also thinking about virtual reality, is like it's generally imagined as a dystopic technology. If you think of the 90s films, there's Kathryn Bigelow's Strange Days or the Wachowskis' Matrix. It's always this dystopic technology, and there isn't that many positive imaginaries around virtual reality. But suddenly there was this like big hype around this technology in real life, and we were curious to see what would happen. And in 2016, this happened, which was a very interesting moment. This is after Facebook bought Oculus, and this is 2016 in, I think, Mobile World Congress. And this is even more dystopic than most of the sci-fi films that we have seen. And also around that same time, Palmer Luckey, the founder of Oculus, gave this interview to the Wired magazine. And he was young, he was, I think, 24, 25, but it was still an entry into kind of how these tech companies thought about this technology and what they were imagining about it. So in this interview, he said, once you've perfected virtual reality, you can imagine a world where you don't need to perfect anything else. So his argument was basically it wouldn't be possible to solve all the problems in the world, such as poverty, but it would be possible to solve them in virtual reality, and that we can give the lives of the wealthy few to everyone in the world by perfecting this technology. And of course, this is very problematic, of course, for, you know, for many, very obvious reasons. But again, this was also accepted by many people in the tech world as well. And this is Palmer Luckey. This is a bit of an unfortunate pose. He was on the Time cover magazine. And maybe it's a little bit of a cruel cover as well. But again, in that same interview, he said, if people are having a virtually happy life, they're having a happy life, period. So there was this idea of perfecting virtual reality, creating the metaverse, or creating this world that everything is possible, and making people live in these worlds. And this was one of the futures that was being imagined by these tech companies. And Facebook bought Oculus just because of this reason, because they were imagining Oculus to be this multi-player social platform that everyone would log in and everyone would like spend a lot of their time in, and also put like all their attention into this platform. So we were interested in like, yes, what is the future that is being developed, but also where are these ideas coming from? Or how did they develop? Or like, where did these come from? But also on the other side of the coin, there was something else happening as well. So there was this, these people who thought VR, once perfected, would be this perfect world. But then some people thought that we were already there, and that we are already living in the perfect world. And enter stage Elon Musk. In one interview, he said, he was talking about simulation hypothesis, and he said that the odds that we are in base reality are 1 in billions. And basically this, he's talking about the simulation hypothesis here. And the idea there is that we are already living in a simulation. The world is a simulation. And this idea comes from, of course, it goes to Plato's cave, but it was popularized by this article by Nick Bostrom in 2003. It's called, Are You Living in a Computer Simulation? And his argument there is that, you know, we have all this computation power, and if we are going to develop it, we will definitely be able to run realistic simulations. So it's either that there are more advanced civilizations than us that like manage to run perfect simulations and we are living in them, or we are going to go extinct before we arrive at that point. And this idea of simulation hypothesis got actually a lot of attention in the tech community. And it is kind of becoming this type of a new theology or like a new belief system. And then there's this very interesting idea about responsibility, this question of responsibility when it comes to simulation hypothesis, because what does it mean? What is the underlying things when we say that we are living in a simulation, especially in a planet that is in ecological collapse? So is this an argument to feel better about ourselves in a world of climate crisis? Or is this a way for the rich to defer responsibility? Or is this just like kind of a thought experiment and something interesting? We were very interested in these, and kind of like we wanted to approach the simulation hypothesis and the world being a simulation from I think, from an ethical standpoint. And we followed Elon Musk's argument in our thinking. So how he argues that we are living in a simulation is that he says, look, 40 years ago, there was Pong, one of the first video games, and it was just this crude graphics. And right now we have virtual reality and photorealistic graphics. And this image you are seeing, this is basically a 3D model created by this company, realities.io. And it is almost indistinguishable from reality. It looks like a real photograph, but this is a 3D model. And then also, of course, there's the GAN and AI technologies that can create very realistic images. And all these faces are created by GAN algorithms, and these people actually don't exist. So his idea is that we were here, now we are here, and you know, in 100 years, where will we be? Or like in 1,000 years, where will we be? And it is very likely that in the future, we will have games or virtual experiences that is indistinguishable from reality. So if we are going to have that soon, it's very likely that we are in a simulation currently. So the idea here, I think, which interested us most is that this is a technology, virtual reality, video games, computer graphics. This is a technology that has philosophical stakes. It is a technology that changes how we conceptualize ourselves and how we conceptualize the world. We think the world is a simulation just because we have these technologies of simulation, and these technologies allow us to see the world as in their form as well. So following this idea, we went to a precursor moment, and that's the camera obscura of the 16th century. There's this great book by Jonathan Crary called The Techniques of the Observer, and we were both very much inspired by that book. But he does this very interesting argument in there, which is a bit of a stretch, but I think it's a very interesting thought experiment. He says that around in 16th century, camera obscura technology was very popular among thinkers. especially philosophers. And this is also around the same time Descartes came up with the mind-body dualism and the Cartesian philosophy. And his argument is that Descartes actually spent a lot of time in Camera Obscura, and Camera Obscura is basically this room that is completely darkened with a little hole, and the outside world is reflected upside down within this room. So you're in this room completely dark with your body, but you're seeing the outside world on a screen, but you're not actually within your in the world with your body. So Creary's argument kind of goes to the place that saying that because of this Camera Obscura technology, we're able to imagine our minds and our body, and also our body and environment and human from nature, these things as separate entities, because we can spend time in this Camera Obscura and think through. And there is something counterintuitive in the mind-body dualism, because, you know, thinking can happen with all the body and environment, but it became something we took granted. And one argument can say that it is a result of a technology with philosophical stakes. So taking this point and moving to virtual reality, what is the, how does virtual reality and immersive technologies and computer graphics and all the simulation technologies changes how we conceptualize ourselves and how we conceptualize the world? So that was one of the central questions of ARK, as well as all this happening, all this like virtual worlds getting built in a time of great urgency and in the middle of climate crisis. Before leaving, before giving the mic to Kathryn, I just want to say one other quick thing. So this idea of virtual reality, or the dream of virtual reality, even though the technology really starts in 1968, this computational simulation, visual simulation, the dream of it also goes back to 18th century. This is Robert Barker's panorama from 1787. And this is a technology that puts you in a different world, different scene, different environment, and provides a 360 image space. And then there's the very popular technology of the 19th century, stereoscope, which gives you these two images that are very close to each other. And when seen through this device, it shows you an image with depth. So this gives a depth perception, and panorama gives a 360 image space. And when these are connected through computation, it gives a computational reality that you can step in and that you can interact with. And it, of course, this technology then changes how we regard and how we see the outside exterior world. And now we are gonna show you a video of this, but before that, Kathryn, would you like to jump in, or?
Sure, yeah. So this is going to be a video of someone kind of using Ivan Sutherland's headset, the Sword of Damocles. And we got really fixated on this particular moment in history because it is the first head-mounted display. So it is the first time that the kind of computational and the physical reality are existing in the same space for the viewer. You want to play it? You can see the so you can see it's this kind of massive headset with a wire going up to the ceiling and the motion tracker on the back of it. And you'll see in a second that the user looking through the eyepieces here is seeing this kind of cube suspended in space in front of the physical space that they're actually inside of. So it's not like virtual reality that we think of now, where you just disappear into another reality. It's closer to what we think of as augmented reality, with this kind of cube hanging in space in front of the physical world. And so we went and we started to do some more research on Ivan Sutherland, and we looked at a paper that he'd written the year before he created this headset. And it's a paper called The Ultimate Display. And this is where he kind of hypothesizes what the ultimate display could be and what the kind of interfaces between the human and the machine could be. he describes it in a way that I think is very beautiful. He says it could be a looking glass into a mathematical wonderland. But then in the course of the paper, he goes on to describe all of these different interfaces, and Wired called it a seed bomb for emergent technologies, because he manages to anticipate all these different things. He anticipates the like gestural interfaces, eye tracking, speech recognition, stylus. It's kind of amazing reading it now to see how much either he got right or how much people were inspired by this essay. However, the thing that really drew us to this essay was the final paragraph that you see here, which is cryptic and strange. And at the end of this academic paper, he writes, "The ultimate display would, of course, be a room within which the computer can control the existence of matter." He says, "A chair displayed in such a room would be good enough to sit in. Handcuffs displayed in such a room would be confining, and a bullet displayed in such a room would be fatal. With appropriate programming, such a display could literally be the wonderland into which Alice walked." And this passage became a kind of very fruitful place for us to dig into and think about this. The paper, of course, is being supported by ARK. Sutherland works with the military. So there's something in these militaristic and violent images that kind of come from that, but the ways that they're phrased, this kind of cryptic wording of a fable or a myth, and the image of noir, the image of the table, the chair, the handcuffs, and the bullet, and the juxtaposition of that with the Alice in Wonderland story feels like an incredibly strange ending to an academic paper. And so Sutherland's first head-mounted display, which came out the year following this paper, he displays this cube in front of the viewer. So we started to imagine, based on that article, that this cube was this space that's the beginning of everything in the virtual. It's a summoning, it's a potential energy. All of the metaverse is going to begin with this cube, and everything comes from there. And so in our, it becomes one of the main kind of symbols in the virtual reality piece that we created, that this cube expands out and wipes out the rest of the world, and becomes the space in which all of these new imaginaries can play out. And in reality, this cube is the starting point for a lot of what we now live with inside of technology. Sutherland goes on to develop flight simulators. And so he's very influential in where the military progresses technologically. And one of his students, Edwin Catmull, goes on to found Pixar and is now the head of Disney. And so all of these ideas are also tracing into the entertainment, the kind of dominant modes of entertainment that we live with now. This is Edwin Catmull's hand. This is the first body part that exists in let's say the metaverse, in the virtual world. And what he did, it was actually a very physical process. He cast his hand in plaster, and he then drew polygons all across it to kind of translate it into a language that the computer could understand. And again, this is a tangent, but it's a story I really love. He describes when he writes about this, that when he pulls his hand out of the cast that he makes, he's forgotten to put Vaseline on it. And so he tears all the hairs from his hand out as he takes them from the cast. And it's another of those resonant images of like the physical and the virtual coming into contact with each other. But this hand goes on to create this movie where, as the movie progresses, the hand turns towards the viewer, points at them, and seems to beckon them to follow the hand into the virtual world. So these two images, the hand and the cube, become the dominant images in our virtual reality piece. One is the world in which everything is happening, and the hand becomes a kind of symbol of agency or accountability inside of that world. We also became really interested in why this headset was called the Sword of Damocles. Does anyone know the Sword of Damocles story? It's a story written by Cicero, and it's about a very powerful king. This is him right here. And one of his courtiers is trying to flatter him, and he says, you know, what a wonderful life you lead. You're so wealthy and powerful. You have, it must be so fantastic being you. And the king says, actually, why don't you come and try it? And so he puts him in the throne. He surrounds him with wealth and food and opulence. And the courtiers, eating the food and enjoying this life. And suddenly he looks up above him and he notices that above him, suspended by a single hair, is a razor-sharp sword. And suddenly the food becomes tasteless and the wealth meaningless. And so we thought that this was potentially a kind of coded reference inside of this headset to some of the threats of this technology. It can provide us with, this incredible, beautiful environment, but there is also this threat. And particularly because of what we were thinking about, these kind of parallels between the rise of the virtual and the destruction of the environment, we were thinking of it as kind of potentially to do with climate crisis. And we emailed Ivan Sutherland to introduce ourselves, tell him we were working on his, looking at his material and asking him if he thought that his Cicero story paralleled our current situation. And he replied that it absolutely did not. However, he did acknowledge that climate change is a kind of metaphorical sword hanging over the heads of the entire race. We then followed up that email with an invitation to Mr. Sutherland to join in our film, and we asked him if we could cast him in it. And this, we got a categorical no. But we continue our correspondence with him. Most recently, he gave us a review of our film, which was not at all positive. But I'm very much enjoying this interaction with him and hearing what he thinks about our idea, kind of like all these ideas we dream up related to his technologies and what he actually thinks they mean. So his phrase, the computer will control the existence of matter, led us to think about these kind of parallel timeframes between the rise of the virtual and the destruction of the physical. And in the very first piece that we made around this topic, this was a 2-channel installation, we played with this progression between these two worlds. In this piece, you can see here on one half, there's a photograph of the lizard, and on the other half is a 3D model of the same lizard. And we began working with a group of scientists at UMass Amherst who are trying to create 3D models of all animals on Earth, beginning with the ones most likely to go extinct. And so we started to kind of follow and track these different groups that were doing this. There's, people doing this with animals, people doing this with buildings. We were also following a trend on social media of #BackUpThePlanet, where individual users were 3D scanning really quotidian items from their daily life, sneakers and fire hydrants and things like this, and uploading them to Sketchfab and creating their own kind of archive in 3 dimensions. In this piece, we kind of pushed into the realm of speculative fiction, but based on a kind of truth. We were looking also at the Argentinian novel, The Invention of Morel, which I don't know if anyone's read it, but it's this very beautiful story. A man is in love with a woman and he's trying to capture her and the moment and record it. And the process of recording it and capturing it destroys the thing that is being recorded. And we use this kind of fable structure in the first piece so that every time something is scanned, something else disappears from the physical world. And it's not always a one-to-one correspondence, but it's a kind of communication, like as one thing is rising, the other thing is falling. So that is a speculative fiction, but at the same time, it taps into kind of our central thesis, which is that computational thinking is allowing us to see the climate crisis through models and things, but it's also behind the world systems that are causing the climate crisis. And so we wanted to question what this relationship was. Is it just a coincidence? Is it a kind of escapist fantasy, as Deniz said earlier? Is it what distracts us from the destruction? Or is it somehow part of the cause of the destruction? So in the virtual reality piece, we began to explore this through the changing graphics in VR and this desire to move towards the perfect mimesis of reality in the virtual world. We display the virtual reality piece, or we will display the virtual reality piece when it's fully installed inside of a camera obscura to kind of create a comparison between these two technologies. As Deniz was saying earlier, this idea that if this technology led us to a certain conception of the body and the world, what is this new technology? What kind of theories is this new technology going to lead us to? How is it going to change our relationship to the world? And so this is just a kind of mock-up of like a installation we created with the camera obscura in Istanbul earlier this year. And so then some of you will be able to go and try that virtual experience after this talk, but the third piece that we've created around this is the film that we're going to screen for you now. For those of you on Zoom, what we're going to do is we're going to send you the link, because watching a film over Zoom is never a good idea. So we're going to send you the link. We're going to ask you to mute your Zoom and to watch the link and then come back and rejoin us for the Q&A. And then for those in the screening room at CC, we're going to just mute the Zoom here and screen it for you. And I don't want to talk too much about this film. I mean, I think everything that we've said so far informs the film. So I'll let it play and then we can come back together and do some questions and answers about it. All right, so see everyone in approximately, Deniz, can you put the link?
I'll put it in the chat momentarily.
Can everyone see that link in the chat? Maybe on Zoom, just do a thumbs up if you can see the link.
So there is the link and it is password protected. So I just sent the password as well.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, everyone put yourselves on. See you in 12 minutes.
I think most of us are
We're
back.
back.
Yeah.
I think I can hear someone listen to it.
Kathryn, I think that was a wonderful movie. Thank you so much. Deniz, I think a lot of food for thought for food, whatever you want to call it. An absolutely great presentation there. Can you hear me?
Thank
good,
you.
excellent. So I think, is this the time? Do you have any more comments, Kathryn and Deniz? Go ahead, please.
I think this is a good time to get into discussion, and if you have any questions.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're going to open actually the floor for questions if anybody has any. I'm going to be moderating this session. So go ahead, if you have any questions, let us know. Either chime in or open your video. It's being recorded, just so that you know. So if you don't feel comfortable coming on video, you could just still ask a question to us. So if anybody has a question.
And maybe I'll just say, if anyone in this room has a question, I'll just repeat it again so the Zoom people can hear it.
Thank you.
Way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I do want to start by saying that Professor Hunter-Larsen and then also Dr. Platt is our collaborating, faculty in Colorado College, and we want to thank them about just joining in with the presentation and everything else. So, Kathryn, can you pass it along to the room there too?
Thank you. There we go. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So I think opening for questions from anyone from Colorado College or here at UCCS. Kathryn, let me begin with my question, which I was watching the movie and I wanted to ask both of you, and fantastic writing and everything was perfectly done and everything else. I want to ask you, what is the positive, if at all, of the new technology, which you see come up in your discussions while you were kind of imagining this movie? Did you hear my question? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So that's something we were discussing today as well. For example, we are working with the Digital Life project at UMass Amherst, and their take on it is that there are animals going extinct, and if we have like high fidelity 3D models of them, and if we also store their DNA, we can in the future recreate them. And this is almost like a project for posterity to like bring back these animals that are going extinct. It's in a way like a necrofauna project. And that's actually like one of the reasons we started calling this project ARK, because we are creating this digital virtual ARK to almost like kind of bring the world back, or like kind of, we're uploading it and then hopefully we'll download it later on. But again, I think that is assuming the worst in a way. And what is the positives of this technology? I think there are positives, but I think with virtual reality especially, there is a bit of lack of imagination in what type of a world it would bring and what type of a world we would live in if virtual reality was to be, and the metaverse was to be the dominant technology. And I think there is also kind of like a bit of a resistance to this technology because there isn't that imaginary that caught up popular attention yet. And I think that is probably much harder to kind of come up with like this positive imagery of what this technology can be. I think in the 90s, for example, there was a lot of thoughts about this virtual reality and virtual space, about identity being much more fluid, and we can be like anyone we want, and we can also like kind of interact with everyone. And I kind of think that that idea evolved into like 90s and early 2000s idea around the internet. And it was a very strong idea. But I guess right now, I don't know if there's anything as strong as that. Kathryn, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we hear a lot about virtual reality being used in different industries, in medicine, and I think there are a lot of people using it for like very specific productive ends, and it is a very powerful tool. I think what we were interested in doing in this is actually just taking one step further back and asking the larger question about what, we call it an ARK, but if you're thinking of it as an ARK, you're also supposing that the climate crisis is a kind of act of God which we cannot do anything about. And so taking a step back and asking if the ARK is actually part of the problem is kind of the intention of this piece. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are perfectly good questions. I was just wondering, how is, because the cause and effect of the technology, sustainability is connected with the kind of the philosophical concept here is that somehow as the digital world has the same simulation models, maybe we will not miss the generations which are going extinct. And something like that, that's what I got from the movie. Do you think anything can be done to reverse the trend for losing those species, if I may say so? Turtles, the way the turtles go, the whole humanity goes. So go ahead and talk about that, Stu.
I had a conversation recently with someone about like kind of climate pessimism. And I was wondering if this was a like climate pessimistic piece. And the conclusion we came to was it wasn't, because by saying that there is a solution, even if by proposing a way out, even if it's a way out that you are disparaging or you're critical of, you're still saying that there is a way to kind of keep tumbling this problem. It's not just an end. So I don't know. I'm still not convinced. I don't know whether this is a kind of climate pessimism piece or not, but I like that idea that there was a way out. I think we have a question in the room here.
Yes, yeah, Kathryn, I'm glad you bring up the climate pessimism. I was thinking about the melancholia, trying to think about the melancholia, like, is that the intended tone? What do I make of the intended tone of this? If it is, in this context, I also the melancholia being evoked for me by the wonderful and erudite and very absorbing voice that is yours and presumably yours in Deniz's writing. It is still kind of the voice of the speaking subject, which places there's a kind of humanistic or anthropocentric kind of positioning.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if you've been thinking about that. Is like, you just comment on some of that.
Yeah. So I don't know. Could you hear that on Zoom? Okay.
Yeah, it would be great if you can repeat.
The question was about tone and about the melancholy in the piece, and also about the speaking subject. I think we recorded this voiceover so many times. I lost my mind trying to. We did it so many tones. We did absolutely every version, and it started off much more objective. And by the end, we kind of the tone that I think we've talked about this tone being is a kind of seduction into the cult of the simulation theory. And I think that part of that is and then there is a change in address partway through, where it goes from being more objective to going we, us, our, for the speaking voice to include themselves in that the group of the simulation theorists. Yeah. Deniz, do you have any more to say to that?
About melancholy, I mean, I think there's definitely like a sense of melancholia, but like I agree that there's like seduction. I mean, that was actually like kind of like our brief together, like kind of to make like a seductive voice, seductive but also compassionate. And I don't know, I mean, that's maybe like the next question, but like if there's a relationship between death and eroticism, what's eroticism in the age of climate crisis? And kind of like that was like one maybe like seed of an idea that we were playing with there.
And the comfort that it can actually provide when you're faced with inability to do, like a feeling that you have no agency in the way that the world is going. The comfort that these kind of, I certainly, when I was speaking it, I was trying to imagine why people would believe in this theory, why this theory is so seductive, why it has gained such traction in our society, and why it's gaining traction. So I kind of wanted to put myself on that side of it rather than just the critical voice standing outside of it. And I think it is entirely anthropocentric, but I think that is kind of like, I think simulation theory is entirely that. I mean, the idea that we can, also the idea with these, the melancholy for me comes from the fact that all these scans are these, and maybe this goes back to your question, Semwal, of these scans, they're just scanning the shell of the animal. They're not scanning any of the organs. They're not scanning the environment or the ecosystem. It's a very old version of kind of like the notion of biologically what it, like an individual is. And so there's such melancholy for me in those like rhinoceros completely divorced from environment, or the fact that when you're looking at these models online, you can kind of go inside of the tortoise and see it inside out and it's just empty, it's just a shell. So I think something about these models is incredibly melancholy.
Mm-hmm. And I think there are tangential feelings of like kind of like melancholy, climate pessimism. But I think one other thing that I think is very important is grief, climate grief. And I think it is not necessarily, it is definitely not a bad thing. Like grieving is, I think, the precursor to any sort of meaningful climate action. So it almost like makes us stronger. So regarding climate pessimism, if it is not pessimism, but grieving, I think that's a very healthy stage, and that it is definitely worth going through it periodically.
I think we are at a time where it's kind of 3:02, but we did start a little bit late. We have some more time for some questions, perhaps, from the audience. Go ahead, if you are in Zoom or even Colorado College Place, you are free to ask us questions. Both artists are in front of us. We never get a chance like this. These movies are going to be somewhere else, and we'll be seeing these movies virtually and then wondering what the artist was thinking. And so it is a time for us to think about, go behind the scenes and talk. So if you have any questions, please don't hold that questions. You can ask them right now.
We have a couple of questions in the room.
Please.
First of all, thank you so much for showing us this. I think it's a fascinating project, and well, it's at the intersection of all the fields that I'm really interested in. So it's really cool to me. I wanted to ask, alongside this fairly pessimistic view of the simulation theory and of how VR is making it easier to set aside the climate crisis, do you think that VR could contribute to the fight against the climate crisis?
Yeah, I just read. So the question is, alongside this kind of melancholy and pessimism, are there ways that VR could contribute to the fight against the climate crisis?
Hmm.
I mean, we made a VR piece, so we obviously, well, I mean, maybe that's an answer. We've made a piece. I think we're less disparaging the technology itself than the ways in which it is currently being framed and the ends to which it is being put. There's very little kind of critical engagement with the medium, inside of the medium, and also just an acknowledgement of the kind of invisible computational power it takes to drive these things and the impact that that has on the world, that I don't think we fully acknowledge in our piece, but it's definitely part of our conversations and part of the way that we got into this. But yeah, I think any medium that you can use to open up people's, change people's thinking, you know, introduce new ideas is potentially a way that we can start to think about the climate crisis and solutions, at least.
Yeah, and I think there's something like very, there's like this embodied experience with VR. I kind of like remember this experience of, there was this piece called Greenland Melting, and it was set in a glacier that has been melting, and kind of like you go there, you see the glacier and talk to scientists. And it was a nice, very informative piece, 10 minutes long, kind of like in the style of maybe like a television documentary. And I remember liking it, but like it didn't stay with me that much up until the point that I saw the same glacier on television, like I think a year later, and I was like, I've been there, but I also knew that I've never been to Greenland. And then it took me like maybe 5 minutes to figure out I actually saw it in VR. So, you know, I don't know what this means, or like how it can like kind of help in fight the climate crisis, but like I think there's something unique about like what type of perception we get from VR, or like what type of affect we get from it.
And I'll add to that as well. I mean, we talk a lot, Deniz wrote his thesis on the idea of embodied montage. And we talk a lot about kind of altered causalities. And I think there's something in virtual reality, and that you could, you know, Sutherland says that it's this kind of mathematical wonderland. You can completely change the laws of physics inside of it. You can experiment with new kinds of causalities. And I think there is huge potential there for maybe creating new imaginaries of the relationship between the body and the world. Do we have a question in the, I think we have one question here and we have one question in the chat. And should we do those two and call it a thing? Okay, great. The chat question is, what are some of your favorite uses for current VR and AR systems and your personal fascination with it?
I don't know. I mean, I think we have some frustration with the VR systems. There is, I think like what got me really into VR was this like one great work I've seen in 2014. It's called Ascent by Oscar Rabi. If you like can find it, I think it's a very special and personal piece. And I think I'm still stuck at that moment. I think ours is like a bit like we're moving towards this, like from this frustration with VR and what it can be, but what it is not yet. I don't know. What's your fascination, Kathryn?
I mean, so we have a residency at the moment, and we have this studio full of toys, and I spend an awful lot of time playing games, which I was never a gamer, I was never into games, but I'm like belatedly really getting into some of the VR games. And I think when I start to think about them, there's one called Superhot, which is one of the most popular games right now, but the ways in which you change time, I don't know who's played it, and like a few people have played it. Superhot, yeah, you move slowly and time moves slowly. And the graphics are very simple, but they're very beautiful. You speed up and time speeds up, and it's just entrancing to play it. And then this is less a piece that I enjoyed, but it's a really strange experience with it was when we played Alex, which is this hyper-realistic kind of world that you enter into. And I played it for about 20 minutes. And when I took the headset off, I'd lost all depth perception. And there was something about moving from the virtual world to the physical world and losing my ability to understand the laws of physics in the physical world that I don't know what to do with yet. But it was a very strange experience that I think has a lot of like it's never going to leave me. Like it was really shocking experience.
I think that's interesting. Like, for example, in video games, you have all these affordances and interaction mechanisms. For example, as a video game character, you, let's say, like kind of like do this with your hand and then like kind of like pick like an object from like far away. And that is not an embodied experience. But like, I think when it happens in virtual reality and when it happens consistently and over time, then your brain codes it as like kind of real life. So I think that was my experience with Half-Life as well, that like after like playing it for 40 minutes, it's like you come back to the real world and nope, you're trying to repeat the affordances of the game in the physical world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you start to understand how you could believe that that world was more real than this one.
Yeah. Okay, Kathryn, just so that there is a word which is used for virtual reality, which is artificial reality, which was being used by Mara and Kruger, that in turn could also create an impression that this is a different, not the reality, not the virtual, but it is a different world which is in front of us. And so your experience could be part of that, exchange of the real and the imaginary and those kind of things. I know there is a students or somebody waiting to hear about their question. So I'll let you go to the person who is there in Colorado College.
Okay, great.
I have a short question. I'm curious why film
The question is, why did we use film as a medium to express this? What was appealing about film?
Very nice.
Yeah. I can jump in. I got like a very simple kind of basic answer, which is that just the very first impulse to create the 2 channel was purely practical. We had all this research. We've been thinking about these ideas for a long time, and we got a commission to make a piece. And the commission would not, at the time, and the kind of resources would not allow us to make a piece in virtual reality. And so we used film as a way to explore those ideas in the 2 channel. But I also think that there is something that we talk about a lot about accessibility with virtual reality, and that a lot of people don't want to put that headset on, can't put that headset on. You show it in a gallery, like we're going to have it out here now. It is a 12-minute piece. Like, how many people are actually going to stick around and do it? You put it in a museum. So many times I go see virtual reality in a museum, and I don't actually see it because the line is too long. It's badly organized. Like, it's not an accessible medium. I mean, some people just physically aren't able to deal with the headset on their face. So we've also been looking for ways to explore the research that we're doing in ways that are more accessible. And so, writing, making films, these are ways that we can get these ideas out in a different kind, like have different kind of distribution of these ideas.
And thinking about it, it is not kind of that different than making a film about the world, because both the world and the virtual reality are like these 3-dimensional spaces, and using film, you flatten them into a 2-dimensional surface, and that kind of gives a bit of a distance and like a room to analyze, I think, things. And I think that's interesting, because like kind of what's the difference between having a camera in real world and shooting stuff versus having a virtual camera in a VR experience or in a video game and shooting it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we're taking them both out of their original mediums and placing them in this other third space. Yeah.
Well, I think I just want to say thank you very much, Kathryn. I know there are a lot of questions which we could perhaps come to you. We might have your emails and pose those questions if people think about something. Kathryn and hopefully Ryan are available for, Deniz is available for our questions and answers down the road. For now, I would just say thank you from UCCS-IASP. This is a series, which is a wonderful series, which we have started. Thanks to you being our first speakers, Kathryn and Deniz. We appreciate it. It's a lot of creativity. I also wanted to thank Colorado College professors, Dr. Larsen, Jessica, and then also Ryan, Dr. Platt. Wonderful collaboration, perhaps possibilities. And of course, our own visual and performing arts, Kevin Landis, who may be here, maybe not. He had something else come up, but thank you very much, Kevin, for introducing me to Kathryn, and now through Kathryn, Deniz. Wonderful. The next meeting is actually October 9th. It is all set. UCCS-IASP is bringing in an expert in autism. We're going to stay with East Coast. We like the East Coast so far. We're going to stay with East Coast Mass General Director of Autism, and the center there is visiting us on October 9th. All of you are invited, and we will be sending you a kind of invite on the Zoom. Kathryn, Deniz, and Kevin, last thoughts from you all. Kevin, you go ahead first, please.
I just want to thank you again, Semwal, and everyone accumulated from Colorado College onto UCCS. Every time I see collaboration at UCCS and then extended to Colorado College and bringing in the whole community in these sorts of conversations, I'm really happy. So thank you, Semwal, and thank you to our guests.
Yeah, thank you to everyone at both colleges for having us. It's been really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you all. I think this ends our official conversation with the ARK, the ARK, and now we know the meaning. I appreciate all of you being there. See you next time. Bye-bye.